My best friend of 18 years told me she saw my husband kissing another woman outside a hotel. She gave me the hotel, the time, what the woman looked like. She even described what my husband was wearing. There was just one problem. At the exact time she claimed she saw him there, my husband was standing on a stage in front of more than 200 people. And there was video. At first, I thought my best friend had made one horrible mistake. I was wrong, because when I finally learned why she lied, I realized she had been quietly interfering in my marriage for almost a year. My name is Claire. I'm 34, my husband, Ben, is 36, and we've been married for 8 years. We have a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. And until recently, I would have told you that Megan was basically my sister. We met when we were 16. Same chemistry class, same terrible haircut phase, same obsession with cheap iced coffee before cheap iced coffee became a personality trait. We survived high school together, went to different colleges, but stayed close, and somehow made it through our 20s without becoming those friends who only send each other birthday messages once a year. Megan knew everything about me. She was there when my mom had breast cancer. She helped me move apartments twice. She was one of the first people I called after Ben proposed. She stood beside me at my wedding. When Sophie was born, Megan sat in the hospital waiting room for almost 9 hours. So understand this. When I say she was my best friend, I don't mean someone I occasionally had brunch with. I mean family. At least, that's what I thought. Things started changing a couple of years ago. Not dramatically. That's probably why I didn't notice. Ben and I bought a house about 30 minutes outside the city. I got promoted at work, Sophie started kindergarten, our lives became more structured. Weekends suddenly involved birthday parties, soccer practice, grocery shopping, laundry, visiting Ben's parents, and trying to convince a 6-year-old that brushing her teeth was government oppression. I couldn't do spontaneous Tuesday dinners at 9 at night anymore. I couldn't decide on Thursday to leave town Friday afternoon. And Megan noticed. At first, she joked about it. She called me Suburban Claire. She'd say, "Blink twice if Ben is holding you hostage," or "Remember when you used to be fun?" I laughed because Megan had always been sarcastic, and honestly, sometimes I missed that version of myself too. But then the jokes became comments. If I said I couldn't go somewhere because Sophie had something, Megan would say, "You know Ben is also her parent, right?" Or if I said Ben and I already had plans, she'd say, "Of course you do." Sometimes she made little observations about my marriage. "Ben seemed annoyed when you mentioned your work trip. He always answers questions for you. Do you ever feel like you ask permission instead of just doing things?" The strange thing was, I didn't see my marriage that way at all. Ben isn't perfect, neither am I. We argue about money sometimes, he leaves cabinet doors open like he's trying to communicate with ghosts. I overbook our weekends and then complain that we're exhausted. We're normal, but controlling? No. If anything, Ben was usually the one telling me to go see my friends. So whenever Megan made those comments, I brushed them off. Then came the hotel. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Megan texted me, "Can we talk after work?" Alone? I knew immediately something was wrong. We met at a coffee shop near my office. She barely touched her drink. Then she said, "I don't know how to tell you this." My stomach dropped. I asked, "Is someone sick?" She shook her head. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. I saw Ben with another woman. Everything in me went cold. I didn't say anything. Megan continued. She said it happened Tuesday morning outside the Grant Hotel downtown. She had supposedly been walking from a parking garage to a client meeting when she saw Ben standing near the valet area with a woman, brunette, tall, maybe early 30s. According to Megan, they were standing extremely close. Then Ben kissed her, not on the cheek. Megan made that very clear. She said, "I'm sorry, Claire, but it wasn't friendly." I asked what time. She said, "About 8:40. I remember staring at her, not because I was devastated, because something didn't make sense. I asked, "Tuesday?" "Yes." "This Tuesday?" "Yes." "Are you absolutely sure?" She looked offended. Claire, I know what your husband looks like. I asked what he was wearing. Gray pants, white shirt, dark blue jacket. That actually sounded like Ben. Then she said, I didn't want to tell you until I was completely sure. That sentence almost made me laugh, because by then I already knew she wasn't sure. Actually, I knew she was wrong. Ben works for an engineering firm. Tuesday morning, his company held a regional infrastructure conference at the Civic Convention Center on the other side of downtown, nowhere near the Grand Hotel. At 8:15, Ben was introduced as part of a panel. The panel ended at 9:05. I knew because Ben had been nervous about speaking in public for 2 weeks. I watched the live stream from my desk. At 8:40, the exact time Megan supposedly watched him kiss a brunette outside a hotel, my husband was answering a question about municipal drainage systems in front of a ballroom full of engineers. I even sent him a text afterward. You didn't look terrified. Very convincing. He replied, Oscar season. I didn't tell Megan immediately. I wanted to understand what was happening, so I asked, Did you see his car? She said yes. What kind? She paused, then said, His SUV. What color? Another pause. Black. Ben drives a dark green Subaru. In bad lighting, maybe someone could call it black, so I kept going. Did he see you? No. Did you take a picture? No, I was too shocked. What entrance? The main one. Then I asked, Why were you near the Grand Hotel? She told me the name of a marketing agency where she supposedly had a meeting. I knew the building. It was almost a mile away. Not impossible, but strange. Then I said, Megan, Ben was speaking at a conference at 8:40 Tuesday morning. She blinked. I continued, There's video. Her face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. She said, Maybe it was Monday. I asked. You just told me 3 times it was Tuesday. I might have mixed up the day. What time Monday? I don't know. But 2 minutes ago you knew it was 8:40. She started crying. That made me question myself for half a second because when someone you love cries, your instinct is to comfort them, even when they're the one hurting you. She said, I know what I saw. I said, Then tell me when you saw it. She couldn't. I got up. She asked me not to leave. I told her, I need you to stay away from me until you can explain why you just tried to convince me my husband is cheating. She said, I wasn't trying to convince you of anything. I said, You gave me a woman, a hotel, a kiss, an outfit, and an exact time. That's not confusion. Then I left. I drove home feeling physically sick. Not because I suddenly thought Ben was cheating, I didn't, but something worse, in a different way, had happened. My best friend had looked me in the eyes and told me a detailed lie about my husband, and I had no idea why. I told Ben after Sophie went to bed. His reaction surprised me. He didn't look shocked, he looked tired. Then he said, Megan said this? I said yes. He rubbed his face. And then he said, Okay, I should have told you something months ago. That was not a sentence I enjoyed hearing. I asked, What? Apparently, Megan had been making strange comments to him, too. At a cookout the previous summer, she had asked him whether he ever worried that I regretted settling down so early. Another time, she told him I seemed unhappy. Ben asked why. Megan said, Claire talks to me. He assumed she meant normal friend venting. Then, around Christmas, Megan told him, You know she misses traveling. Sometimes I think she feels trapped. I stared at him. I had never told Megan I felt trapped because I didn't. I love traveling. I also love my husband and daughter. Those things are not mutually exclusive. I asked Ben why he never told me. He said, Because she's your best friend. I thought she was being protective of you, and I didn't want to make you feel like I was trying to come between you. That sentence stayed with me because suddenly I started remembering things. Little things. A year earlier, Megan told me Ben had rolled his eyes when I said I wanted to take a weekend trip with friends. I confronted him jokingly about it. He looked confused. He said he hadn't. I assumed Megan had misread him. Another time, Megan told me Ben seemed irritated that I was considering applying for a higher position at work. That made no sense because Ben had helped me rewrite my resume. Then there was my birthday dinner. Megan told me afterward that Ben had barely spoken to her and seemed like he didn't want my friends around. I remembered feeling embarrassed. I even apologized to her. But Ben had spent half the dinner dealing with Sophie, who had a stomachache. At the time, every incident was small enough to explain away. Together, they looked different. The next morning, I called our mutual friend, Hannah. I didn't tell her everything immediately. I just asked, "Has Megan ever said anything weird to you about Ben?" There was a long silence. Then Hannah said, "What happened?" That was when I knew. I told her about the hotel. Hannah swore. Then she said, "Claire, I think you need to see something." That evening, she came over. She showed me messages Megan had sent her over the previous year. Nothing said, "I'm going to destroy Claire's marriage." It was more subtle than that. And somehow that made it worse. Megan wrote things like, "She disappears every time Ben wants something. She has no personality outside being a wife and mom anymore. I swear she'd be happier if she were single." And, "I miss who she used to be." One message was from almost 6 months earlier. Hannah had told Megan that people change when they build families. Megan replied, "That doesn't mean everyone around them has to accept being discarded." I read that sentence 4 times. Discarded. I had never thought I'd discarded Megan. I saw her at least twice a month. We texted constantly. I remembered birthdays. I showed up when she needed help moving. I spent 3 days with her after her dog died. But I couldn't give her the version of friendship we had at 23. Apparently, that counted as abandonment. Hannah told me she had pushed back several times. She told Megan she was being unfair. But she never showed me because she thought Megan was just venting. I understood. Everyone vents. But now we had a fake affair. For the next 4 days, Megan called me repeatedly. I didn't answer. Then her mother called. Her mother has known me since high school. She said Megan was devastated. I told her, so am I. Eventually, I agreed to meet Megan. Not alone. Hannah came with me. We met at Megan's apartment. For the first 15 minutes, Megan apologized without explaining anything. She kept saying, "I made a horrible mistake." I said, "A mistake is forgetting my birthday. You invented an affair." She cried. I asked, "Why?" She didn't know. I told her, "Then we're done." That finally got the truth out of her. She said, "I wanted you to see him differently." I asked what that meant. She said, "You are not yourself anymore." I remember feeling strangely calm. I said, "Who am I?" She said, "You used to do things, you used to travel, you used to call me at midnight because you wanted pancakes, you used to just get in the car and go somewhere." I almost laughed. I was 24. She said, "That's not the point." I asked, "What is the point?" And then she said the sentence that explained everything. "I wanted my friend back." Hannah actually stood up. She said, "You tried to break up her marriage because you wanted her to hang out more?" Megan immediately said no. She insisted it wasn't like that. According to her, she genuinely believed Ben was the reason I had changed. Every time I declined an invitation, every time I chose a family event, every time I couldn't travel, every time I had to leave early because Sophie needed me, in Megan's mind, Ben was slowly taking me away. She had convinced herself that I couldn't see it. So I asked, "You thought he was controlling me?" She nodded. I said, "And your solution was to invent him cheating?" She whispered, "I thought if you believed he cheated, you would finally leave." Finally. That word mattered. I asked, "Finally?" She looked down. I asked her whether the hotel story was the first time she had deliberately tried to create problems between us. She didn't answer. Hannah said, "Megan." And then more came out. The eye roll about my girls' weekend, Ben never rolled his eyes. Megan made it up. The comment about my promotion? Also exaggerated. Ben had apparently said something like, "That job sounds intense." Megan turned it into, "He doesn't want you to succeed." Then she admitted something I hadn't even known about. Months earlier, she had told Ben, "I sometimes wondered if I married too young." I never said that. She said she was trying to make him pay attention to how unhappy I supposedly was. I asked, "So you were telling me he was unhappy with me and telling him he was unhappy with me?" She started crying again. She said, "I know how it sounds." I said, "No, I think you finally know how it sounds." Then she said something that actually made me feel sorry for her. Not enough to forgive her, but enough to understand. She said, "Everyone leaves." Her parents divorced when she was young, her older sister moved across the country, two close friends from college moved away, her longest relationship ended after 3 years, and somewhere along the way, she decided that people building lives without her meant they were abandoning her. I told her, "I didn't abandon you." She said, "It felt like you did." I said, "Feeling abandoned does not give you permission to manufacture a betrayal." She nodded. Then she said, "I thought once you left him, things would go back to normal." And that was when I finally understood how far apart our definitions of normal had become. I said, "Megan, you weren't trying to save me from my marriage." She looked at me. I said, "You were trying to save the version of me that belonged to you." She started sobbing. I did too, because I loved her. That's the part people sometimes don't understand about ending a toxic relationship. You don't stop loving someone the second you realize they're bad for you. Sometimes you love them while walking away. I told her our friendship was over. She asked if 18 years meant nothing. I said, "It means this hurts more." She begged me to go to counseling with her. I refused. I told her counseling is something you do when two people are trying to repair a relationship. I wasn't. I wanted distance. Real distance. For the first few weeks, our friend group became a mess. Some people completely cut Megan off. Some believed what she did was horrible, but thought 18 years of friendship deserved another chance. One friend told me, "She clearly needs help." I agreed. But needing help and being entitled to my presence are not the same thing. Megan eventually started therapy. I know because her mother told me. I asked her mother, gently, not to update me anymore. Ben and I also had some uncomfortable conversations. Not because Megan almost broke us up, she didn't, but because we realized we had both ignored strange behavior to protect my friendship with her. Ben didn't tell me what Megan was saying because he didn't want to seem controlling. I didn't take her comments seriously because admitting something was wrong would mean questioning someone I had trusted for almost 2 decades. We both learned something. Trust doesn't mean refusing to look at uncomfortable things. Sometimes trust means being willing to talk about them. 6 months have passed. Megan sent me one letter. Not a text, an actual letter. It was 5 pages long. She apologized, without asking me to forgive her. She said therapy was making her realize that whenever someone became less available to her, she treated it like rejection. She said instead of accepting that our friendship had changed because our lives had changed, she kept treating every new responsibility in my life like something that was taking me away from her. Near the end, she wrote, "You weren't abandoning me. Your life was changing, and I kept treating every change like proof that I mattered less. I used that fear to justify things I had no right to do." I cried when I read it. I still didn't respond. Maybe someday I will. I genuinely don't know. I don't hate Megan. Part of me hopes therapy helps her. I hope she builds a good life. I hope she learns that somebody becoming less available doesn't automatically mean they love you less. But I also know something now that I didn't know before. History is not the same thing as trust. 18 years can explain why losing someone is devastating. It does not automatically make them safe. And every once in a while, I think about what would have happened if Megan had chosen a different time. What if Ben hadn't been on the stage? What if there hadn't been a live stream? What if she had simply said she saw him leaving a restaurant one afternoon? Would I have believed her? Would I have started checking his phone? Would Ben have started resenting me for doubting him? Could one person who claimed to love me have slowly damaged something that had nothing to do with her? That question bothers me more than the lie itself, because she didn't need me to divorce Ben that afternoon. She only needed me to doubt him. Once. Then again. Then a little more. And maybe eventually she would have gotten what she wanted. The old Claire. Single. Available. Calling at midnight for pancakes. Except that woman doesn't exist anymore, and I don't want her back. My life didn't get smaller when I got married and became a mother. It got bigger. Megan couldn't accept that. So now I'm left with a question I still don't completely know how to answer. If someone has loved you for almost 20 years, but deliberately tries to destroy your marriage because they're terrified of losing you, does 18 years of history earn them one chance to rebuild your trust? Or does trying to manipulate you into ending your family cross a line that friendship can never come back from? Because Megan says she finally understands what she did, and maybe she does. But every time I consider answering that letter, I remember her sitting across from me in that coffee shop, holding my hand, looking me directly in the eyes, and saying, "I'm sorry, Claire, but I know what I saw." She didn't know what she saw. She knew what she wanted me to believe. And I'm still not sure I can ever forget the difference. Drop your verdict in the comments and subscribe, because here, one story always leads to another.